Okay, well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you coming in the late afternoon to this session on using synthetic monitor with Kevin Martin from US Cellular. I'll introduce him in just a minute, but thank you for coming and being willing to learn about this session. I want to give a quick introduction to Kevin Martin, but first, my name is Scott Edwards, and I work I'm the Director of Product Marketing in the APM business unit here at CA. And it's been great working with Kevin on this story. Now, some of you may have had an APM solution for a while, maybe new customers, same with doing synthetic monitoring. But Kevin's story is unique, and I think it's really interesting, and it's new, something that's recently happened, and he'll share that here with us today. But Kevin Martin is the Senior Manager of Enterprise Infrastructure at US Cellular, and he's been the leader in the monitoring for service availability functions at US Cellular for over 19 years. We're glad that he's here. It's interesting that this being Veterans Day, Kevin has also was in the Air Force for 8 years. So please give him a welcome clap for being a veteran. We appreciate it. Kevin's had a ton of experience in a lot of technical domains there at US Cellular, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but very experienced in all that he's done. But US Cellular, it's about this time, I guess, last year, where they looked at a solution from an application performance management solution and chose CA Technologies. And then about July of this year is when they were looking at our synthetic monitoring solution, which is Cloud Monitor. And you'll hear in his story about how they wanted to use this, test it, see how it would work, and were able to get some critical data out of it faster than a pizza was delivered to his house. So you'll hear that story. And just to make sure everyone knows and understands, so if you are familiar, just out of curiosity, maybe I should ask, how many of you are familiar or use the APM Cloud Monitor product for synthetic monitoring? Okay, so Cloud Monitor, which you're all familiar with, is now been renamed to App Synthetic Monitor. So that's what it is. New terminology. But this gives you up-to-the-minute insight into the app performance. And it's a SaaS-based solution. And it really helps you get an insight and understanding into things, within your firewall and also outside the firewall and hosted applications, which Kevin will talk about. So an interesting solution. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Nope, I don't need that. I need the clicker, though.
That's what I want.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here today just to tell you a few stories about how US Cellular has used synthetic monitoring. We subscribed to the synthetic monitoring service in July of this past year. I'm far from an expert in the tool, for sure, so I'm not here to give you a lot of good detail about all this amazing things you can do, because I'm sure I've only scratched the surface on that. First of all, about US Cellular. US Cellular is the 5th largest cellular provider in the United States. In the cellular industry, we would be considered a super regional carrier. We have a little under 5 million customers, and we do about $4 billion a year in revenue. US Cellular is regularly recognized for their outstanding customer service, winning J.D. Power Awards for our customer service, as well as a number of awards for our network quality. So as a focus, how we provide service to our customers is really important to us, not just only from a cellular service, but how we treat them. So our business has been changing a lot since I started 19 years ago, with implementations of call centers versus little regional business offices, and even more importantly, our web presence. At the time when I started at US Cellular, I don't actually even believe we had a website of www.uscellular.com. We may have, I don't remember. But how our customers want to interact with us has drastically changed. More and more want access to their data without having to talk to anybody. They want to be able to use a web portal or an app to be able to manage their account. And so a few years back, we've launched our own customer web portal, which we brand as My Account. And so in our web portal, you can view your bill, view your call detail, pay your bill, set up recurring payments. You can add features to your account. You can add a line to your account. You can buy accessories and check your near real-time usage for voice, data, SMS. And we drive about 80,000 customers a day access our web portal. So it's become really important to us. You also can redeem, and it's actually the only way you can redeem, loyalty rewards. We have a loyalty program where you can go on there and you can apply it for things like overage forgiveness and things like that. And I'll tell a little bit more about this story as well, but in a few minutes. But it's also the only place when we launched the iPhone 6 in September of this year. If you wanted to pre-order, it was the only place you could actually pre-order the phone. You couldn't actually go into a store and pre-order. You had to do it through our customer web portal, which drove a lot more traffic than 80,000 that day. So we're going to walk through three stories that I have on our use of synthetic monitoring, specifically around this web portal. So our web portal is hosted. We have a managed service provider who is responsible for hosting the majority of the infrastructure and deliver content. Now, there are pieces of that we actually own on our own premise. We use our identity solution to authenticate the users. The customer accounts exist on our site. When the service provider wants information regarding the customer, their account, their data usage, that kind of thing, they interface into our enterprise service bus. We have an Oracle service bus, and that's where they get their data to be able to tell you, what your outstanding balance is, those kind of things. So there's a significant U.S. cellular interface piece associated with the hosting provider. This is the thing I wanted most of all. I wanted to be able to get better visibility to around performance, availability, and whatnot. Once we set up monitoring on this, just initially, we got some really good basic data right out of the box. So we can see on the top left, we're able to see what kind of error rates we're having on the pages. We're able to see what the performance looked like, how long it's taking for a transaction to run end-to-end. And probably even more important and more valuable is what's happening when you have a failure. So on this page here, this is a screen print of a transaction that we actually had that failed. So it was loading the page, and we had a number of assertions built into these. An assertion is essentially a content check. So I want to know that a specific piece of content existed on the page when it loaded. And so if you look at this one up here, let's see if I can use the laser. I don't know that. Oh, it's that. Ha! You can see right here, it actually failed because it was looking for a piece of content. This one was why switch with a question mark after it. And so this particular transaction failed because the content wouldn't actually load. This was very quick and simple for us to set up, and now I have some visibility now to what my portal's doing. So some really basic stuff, but in the end, actually still pretty valuable. So, and that was using some of the really basic monitoring stuff that's just out of the box. Nothing fancy. Couple clicks, you got it. But there's another feature within synthetic monitor called real browser monitoring, RBM. And what RBM does is actually uses a real browser to actually execute the transactions measure the performance, and give you data associated with that. And I'll share some of that data in a second. One night, my wife and I were going to have dinner, and none of us wanted to cook. None of us wanted to get ready to go out. So he said, pizza delivery it is. And so we decided we'd order from a place well known for their 30-minute or less delivery. So I logged into their web portal and ordered a pizza. So now I have 30 minutes to kill while we wait for the delivery person to show up and deliver our pizza. So we were a fairly new subscriber. I was like, I haven't done anything with Real Browser Monitor yet. I want to get something up. Let's take a look at it. So there's a recorder. They call it. It's branded as CA Cloud Monitor Recorder. If you're at all familiar with Bad Boy, it's really a kind of an OEM version of Bad Boy. So I go to our site, and there's the link. Download it. Download, install. 2 minutes, piece of cake. And so I had no experience using the tool yet at all. So I'm like, okay, well, there's a record button right there. I bet you if I push the record button and enter something in the browser, it's going to record what I'm doing. So I put in customer.uscellular.com, which is the URL for our web portal, and load it. I have some credentials from some other test things that we do. So put in my test account that I have, log in, logs in fine, log off, hit the record button and stop. So I'm like, okay, well, that was pretty easy. So, all right, let's play it and make sure it works. Hit play in the little browser window in the recorder, and say, there it goes. It goes to the home page, logs in, login page loads, logs out, log out page loads. Like, that was awesome. It's like, but I'd like to know is all the content loading. So I wanted some assertions. So I added a total of 5 different assertions. So I added one on the main login page. And I was like, well, I've never done an assertion with this tool before. How do you do that? Actually, just F1, help, boom. Oh, okay, that's easy. In the end, it was just highlighting it and say, that's what I want my assertion to be. Like, okay, boom. And then the main page has, after you log in, we have a number of microsites also that exist within there. I'm like, well, where I have historically gotten the most complaints is actually within the microsites than we've heard. So like your usage is a microsite when you're real-time data usage or whatever. It's like, well, we get occasionally, it's like, well, my data usage didn't load. Like, well, I'd like to know that that's working. So I added assertions for all of those. And then one for the outbound. I'm like, okay, let's see if this one works. So I hit play. Boom, logs in, says the assertions are there, logs out. Okay, that was great. So now I have what I know to be a working functional script, at least when I run it from Cloud Monitor. So I log into our website, or our Cloud Monitor site, Synthetic Monitor, sorry. Go in and say, okay, well, let's get my script in. So we're going to add a Real Browser Monitor, and it's like, here, upload your script here, boom. How often do you want it to run? Where do you want it to run from? If you're not familiar, there are over 50, I think, stations around the world. I think over 20 in the United States. We are strictly a North American, United States company. So I was like, right there, like, only run it from the United States. There's a button for it, boom, there you go. And what do you think good and bad performance look like? What are your thresholds? So I said, okay. Uploaded it, set it, saved it. It looked at my script, said, yeah, your script looks like it's good. saved, and then it immediately ran a test. Right there on my dashboard, test passed. So now, I still don't have my pizza yet. And I have, with a tool I have limited experience in, using another tool I have no experience in, was able to create a monitor that logs into and verifies responsiveness, availability, and performance of actually our most critical web app. And so about that time, when I was happy and celebrating, ultimately our bacon and tomato pizza showed up, and I got all that done in under 30 minutes because they did actually meet their goal and deliver in 30 minutes or less. Now, the other stories I'm going to tell you is how actually that specific monitor, because it's actually that script that I built, it's actually one still running today. I haven't actually made any changes to it. And so I'm going to tell you a couple stories of how we've used that monitor to get value out of my 30 minutes. So we were having an issue, excuse me, where after you authenticated into our portal, you would get this white screen. You'd pass credentials, boom, then you get this white screen that would last 15 to 20 seconds. Not the customer experience we're shooting for. So when working up until that point with our service provider, their response was always very consistent. Oh, the service calls to your ESB are slow. That's why this is all happening. All your ESB calls are slow. And so we are, as Scott mentioned, we are an APM customer. And so our OSB is fully instrumented, and we're looking and we're like, man, I don't see it. Like, the worst one is like 3 seconds. It's like, but the ones you call, they're all like the worst one's 1.5. It's like, we're not the bottleneck here. They said, well, it also might be, within the credential check. Like, yeah, we looked at that. Those are like 300 milliseconds. We don't think that's it. But they were very firm. Oh, no. So one of the things that Synthetic Monitor with RBM does is it'll save a tree view of every test transaction that it does. So if you have a specific transaction you want to look at, you can say, okay, show me what was happening in the browser in that time. So again, we were pretty new at it. It was something I didn't even totally understand I had available to me immediately. So we're like, okay, let's pull it up and see what it actually happens. So what you see here, these long times, there's a JSP that is on our hosted provider. It's called Get Dashboard. It's called Dashboard, sorry. But we're making a get to load the Dashboard JSP. And that's it calls it 2 times in a row with different parameters associated with it. One of them is taking 12.5 seconds. The other one's taking 3.25 seconds. So there's almost 16 seconds of processing time. That is where the white screen was happening. And so, as I said, we are an APM customer as well. And one of the things we had work to do in the second quarter of the year is work with our hosting provider to let us put APM agents on part of our infrastructure that they're hosting for us, so we can actually see what's going on within their applications. So now I know, well, is this Dashboard JSP? It's like, well, I have a Wiley agent on there. Like, let's do a trace. Let's see what's happening within the Dashboard JSP while this is all going on. And so what you see here, that's kind of fuzzy to read, and I'm sorry. But it's actually a screenshot of the Dashboard JSP that I got. And I was able to show yes, there's some service bus calls in here, but they're all going not too bad. From the applications view, 2.5 seconds. But you have this 8-second window within all of this that's just the JSP processing. It's not making any other calls. Your JSP is trying to figure out what to do with all the information. It's like, that's not me. That's not us. There's nothing I can do on our service bus to make that better. So we set up a call with our business partner, the person who really owns the service for US Cellular, as well as the hosting provider. And so we start the call and this is what we want to talk about. They're like, yeah, that's your ESB. We've talked about this before. We know that's what's going on. And I'm like, well, here, let me show you the data that I have. So I was able to show them. These are actual screenshots I actually took out of the email that I ultimately shared with them of this is what's happening. It's like, you're wrong. Here's what's happening during the white screen. Here's what your JSP is doing during all that. This is an issue within your application. This isn't US Cellular failing to provide you timely responses through our service bus. You're processing and you're slow. And so it's like, well, we don't know that that's right. And I said, okay, you show me the data that you have that says it's the ESB, and compare it to my data. And if you're right, that's fine. But in the end, they had no data there was to support their position at all. It's what they believed was what was happening. But now we have real data. We can say, look, this is what's happening here. This is what's happening here. This is where you need to fix it. So in the end, they're still working on fixing that. But nobody's asking us, what are we doing about our service bus? Now I have my business partner driving our hosting provider to address this problem. And so, as I mentioned before, we launched iPhone 6 with, we were in wave 1 with all the other big carriers. So on September 19th, US Cellular launched the iPhone 6, and we began accepting pre-orders on September 12th. And as I mentioned, the only way you could do a pre-order is through our customer web portal. And so, before the iPhone launch, we had a whole capacity assessment that we did, a readiness assessment. Everybody went through, like, oh yeah, we're great. We don't see any reason why we can't handle all this. So about 10:30 a.m. that morning, we start hearing, customers are saying the portal's really slow. The performance is really degraded. And so this is a business critical service for us. So we had a Sev1 incident open because of it. At that time, I was actually in the middle of working on another thing. And so usually I get on those bridges, but this one I didn't get on because I had something else important I was working on. But I get all the text messages. So about an hour into it, I'm like, why is this still going on? All the updates are investigating. I'm like, well, it's not that complicated. Why is this somebody not found what's going on? And so I open an IM and I'm talking to one of our engineers who's on the bridge and working on it. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And they say, well, what our provider is telling us is that they're seeing really slow response from the ESB again. I said, okay. So having done the thing before, I was like, okay, I have a source of data. Let's take a look and see what my data source says. So here's what it said. So again, this is an actual screenshot from the time this incident was happening. And so what you'll see is all these transactions that are 1 minute in length. And they have some commonality associated with the kind of file that they are, right? So we have a GIF file, our icon for Facebook, which, by the way, is a pretty small icon. It shouldn't take a minute to load. Our icon for YouTube, a PNG file, and a font file. It's like, but they all take 1 minute, and then ultimately they time out. And so I'm like, well, that's not DSP. DSP doesn't do that. It has nothing to do with the fact, presenting a graphic file. It's like looking at it in the browser, because again, this is an actual browser that is essentially the same as a customer's. This is where it's actually configured to use Firefox as the default browser is what we're using. But so I was like, that's not right. You're looking in totally the wrong place. If you're going to sit there and look, in the ESP, you're never going to find the problem. It's in the presentation. It's totally in the presentation layer. There's GIFs and PNGs, and so we were able to really quickly shift where we were looking, and found that in the end it was our web application firewall. So we had a breakdown and a failure from a capacity perspective, unfortunately, within our web application firewall that was causing all of these graphic kind of files to intermittently not deliver. So we were able to really quickly take it out of the path, fail it open, and restore service really quickly after that. But again, it was a point of having all the right data available. Now, ideally, I would have loved to have a monitor running that said, hey, your WAF just exploded or whatever. And we will. But this at least took us and said, this is where you should be looking. You're in the wrong area. And we were able to focus. And once we knew an area to look, we very quickly said, web application firewall. So I am thus far a pretty big fan of synthetic monitoring, or cloud monitoring, as it was called. Very easy to get started. To just even the first thing, we got, hey, here's your license key, here's your login. It was able to very quickly just log in and set some stuff up right away. Very intuitive. Very simple. You can, whether that's creating the graphs that you want, reports that you want, very simple to use. It integrates with APM, which actually was a really valuable piece for us. When we wanted to do that, our engineer said, oh, well, here's how you do that. And emails me a 3-page paper. And I'm like, okay. I'm sure it's not going to be that easy. Nothing ever is. But in the end, my engineer took the 3-page paper and had Cloud Monitor, Synthetic Monitor, pushing data into my APM implementation in less than 2 hours. And so now I can take that data and build it into my default dashboards that my operators are using. So, I have some web service ones, I have websites, and now my engineer or my operators have it right in the same dashboard. They don't have to get an email notification or be looking at the Cloud Monitor dashboard. It's all in their operational dashboard. So that was really helpful and way easier than I really expected it would be. Reliable. I like seeing it from the user's perspective. When you're dealing with a lot of application people like to tell you how their application is performing. They don't like to talk about the presentation layer. It's my JSP, my method, it's responding great. Awesome. It takes you forever to show it to the customer, so they usually don't like to talk about that very much. Having good data and from a customer's perspective has been invaluable to us at this point. So that is my last slide with 1 minute to go. So I'll hang around the area a little bit for questions if anybody wants to ask, but I don't really get to take many right now, but you're welcome to ask me any of them that you want.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Let's give Kevin a round of applause.